You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Julia Kim. These are the headlines on the continent. Ethiopia's Prime Minister rebuffs African Union peace envoys. Abiy Ahmed says he won't talk to the TPLF leaders until they surrender or are defeated. Over 40,000 Ethiopian refugees are now in eastern Sudan, stretching resources there to the limit. The UN says it's airlifted 32 tons of emergency aid, with another 100 to be flown out on Monday. And Ivory Coast's latest cinematic offering premieres to rave reviews. La Nuit des Rois, or The Night of the Kings, is a modern take on the ancient tradition of storytelling against the backdrop of a notorious prison. No dialogue, no negotiations with the TPLF. That's the position of Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed after meeting with peace envoys from the African Union. On Thursday, he announced federal troops were poised to execute the final phase of an offensive in Tigray. They're currently encircling the regional capital, Mekele, which is home to 500,000 people. Meanwhile, the TPLF said Abiy's forces were bombarding towns and inflicting severe damage. Hundreds of people are reported to have been killed in the 3-week conflict. Maria Gerth-Niculescu reports from Addis Ababa.
The meeting took place on Friday morning between the Ethiopian Prime Minister and 3 special envoys of the African Union who had come to Addis Ababa to attempt mediation in the Tigray conflict, which has been going on for over 3 weeks now. But the leaders of the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, did not take part in the discussion, in which Abiy Ahmed welcomed African Union's commitment to find African solutions to African problems. But he reiterated his determination to restore the rule of law and arrest leaders of the TPLF in order, he says, to prevent a culture of impunity in the country. He also says that the National Defense Forces will take all precautionary measures to protect civilian populations and that a humanitarian access route will be identified and supervised by the Ministry of Peace in cooperation with UN agencies. So far, humanitarian organizations were not allowed to access the Tigray region, where about 1 million people have already been internally displaced. Stocks of food, fuel, cash, and other basic supplies are diminishing by the day. The conflict has also forced about 43,000 Ethiopian refugees into a neighboring Sudan, where the UN High Commissioner for Refugees paid a visit on Friday to assess the situation.
Well, as you heard there, over 40,000 refugees have fled from the Tigray region to eastern Sudan. The UN has airlifted 32 tons of emergency aid, with another 100 expected on Monday. Aid groups have besieged the federal government for access to Tigray, where nearly 100,000 displaced Eritreans could run out of food in the next few days. For almost 5 weeks, Addis Ababa has blocked attempts to get aid to these refugee camps. Myra Sofos has more.
More than 43,000 refugees are estimated to have crossed into Sudan from Ethiopia since fighting broke out in Tigray on November the 4th. Local communities and humanitarian workers are struggling to provide food, shelter and healthcare, while maintaining social distancing in the Sudanese refugee camps to tackle COVID-19 is practically impossible. Nearly half of the refugees are children.
I was with my grandmother when I started hearing gunshots. I had to flee on my own because my grandmother was too old to run. I had to spend a night in the wild. It was scary. I didn't have spare clothes or money. I eventually managed to cross the border, and then I asked someone to call my father.
As well as the many Ethiopians who are fleeing the conflict, the UN Refugee Agency says that 96,000 Eritrean refugees are living in 4 camps in Tigray, with some reported to have been in the vicinity of recent clashes. With humanitarian access to the region still being hindered, the UN is negotiating with all parties involved in the conflict to be allowed full access. As of yet, there is no sign of a breakthrough.
Without humanitarian access, it's very hard to say what is actually going on the ground, but there were worrying reports that fighting was getting closer to these refugee camps.
Based on calculations carried out since the last distribution of aid a few weeks ago, food supplies in the Tigray region could run out as early as this coming Monday.
Well, turning now to Burkina Faso, where newly re-elected President Roch Kabore says the opposition leader has congratulated him on his landslide victory after he said he'd reserved the right to challenge the result. Kabore won by an outright majority of 57.9%, doing away with the need for a second ballot. The election was marred by insecurity, which prevented swathes of the country from voting. Our correspondents brought us the reaction from the ground.
It's a shame turnout was so low. I thought people would be enthusiastic and would want to back one of the candidates. Nevertheless, I think the result is perfectly acceptable.
I was a bit scared, but now it's okay. Everyone has accepted the results. Congratulations to the president.
Before the elections, we were scared because they could have said that Roch couldn't run for the presidential election because during his mandate, some things went wrong. We thank God this didn't happen. We pray for peace in this country.
Now, a cyclone that devastated parts of Somalia this week has killed 8 people and displaced 180,000 others. Cyclone Gati is the strongest storm to hit the Horn of Africa nation since satellite records began. 2 years of rain fell in just 2 days, flooding homes, livestock and crops and destroying 70,000 livelihoods. The UN says the cyclone could worsen the once-in-a-generation locust swarm currently plaguing East Africa. One of the world's poorest countries, Somalia is also one of the most vulnerable to climate change, but aid organizations say it receives little funding to cope. And finally, a prison drama that explores the power of narrative and myth-making. La Nuit des Rois, or Night of the Kings, premiered to glowing reviews in the Ivorian capital, Abidjan. Franco-Ivorian director Philippe Lacote has already picked up several international awards for his second feature film, which is also Ivory Coast's entry for the Oscars. Thais Brooke and Sam Bradpiece went to check it out.
Lamaka is Ivory Coast's most notorious prison, and the setting for a new film which tells the story of a young man caught in a power struggle between prisoners vying to become inmate-in-chief.
C'est lui, notre Romain.
Romain is the protagonist's nickname. In the film, he narrates a tale, holding his audience in distracted suspense to buy the prisoner's leader, who had fallen sick, a little more time in power.
Lamaka, c'est la seule prison au monde gouvernée par un détenu.
Romain recounts the legend of Zama, who is a so-called microbe, the Ivorian term for a young delinquent. Most of the actors are newcomers to cinema. The film has already changed the life of Bakary Kone, the student who plays the main character.
J'ai eu la chance de commencer par ce projet-là, premier rôle, premier film. Donc tout ça, c'est vraiment beau et j'ai vraiment envie de continuer.
On Thursday, the film premiered in Abidjan, with the whole crew in attendance. Afterwards, the audience seemed convinced.
Le film est vraiment beau, avec de belles images, de beaux sons. Vraiment, ça montre une autre image du cinéma ivoirien.
C'est un film pertinent pour nous qui décrit les réalités ivoiriennes parce qu'en Côte d'Ivoire, il y a le phénomène des microbes et le film est très réaliste.
The film is also a social commentary, the power struggle reflecting Ivory Coast's recent history.
Quand on travaille sur les métaphores et quand on travaille sur des éléments d'archives comme je fais, il y a des coïncidences comme ça avec la vraie histoire. Et c'est vrai que le film sort aujourd'hui juste après les élections et donc on a tendance à faire des raccourcis ou des projections et c'est bien aussi. On a le droit aussi de faire ces projections, elles ne sont pas fausses.
The film will be released to the general public in Ivory Coast on December 4th before being shown around the world.
Well, it looks like that one could be a hit. So that's it from us here on Eye on Africa. There's more news coming up. Stay tuned.